Welcome back to Pod Save the World. I'm Tommy Vitor.
I'm Ben Rhodes.
Ben, I was in Florida over the weekend. You're in Germany now. Basically the same thing, right? Similar vibes.
Slightly different political vibes.
Boca in Berlin.
Yeah. No, I'm here with our old boss. We just did a 2.5 hour roundtable with young leaders. It was kind of inspiring, actually.
How many leaders?
We had 18 from across Europe, people trying to do the right thing, trying to fix things that are broken. So that made you feel a little bit better about things.
That's cool. Oh, so 18 kids from across. When you say young, what's young these days?
I mean, actually, the young is in your 30s, right? These are people, we had a member of the European Parliament. We've got people fighting corruption in Hungary. We've had a couple of Pod Save the World guests.
Nice.
The woman who does, Hannah, who runs a Green New Deal in the UK. We had some good mix of activists and people in politics. It was great. Excellent.
That's a great group. I wish, next time let's just bring the mic to the round table and just let it
I
run.
know. I was singing that. A number of them said that to me. We had some worldos in the crowd today, so it's not a bad idea.
Next time we'll just stream the whole thing. Well, we have a great show. We have a great show for everyone today. We're going to keep talking about this ongoing crisis in Sudan, how the Pope is trying to make peace in Ukraine. Really interesting story over the weekend about his travels to Budapest. King Charles's coronation is coming up. There's an old but new phone hacking scandal for Rupert Murdoch, a big set of elections in Turkey, the latest on the Pentagon Discord leaks. A star was born, Ben, at the Korean state visit in Washington. And then Ron DeSantis' foreign trip seems to have gone a little south. That's the window from here.
I think that's fair to say. I heard you guys kind of deliver a few body blows on Pod Save America, and I'm happy to try to finish off Ron DeSantis here on Pod Save the World.
Are you saying he hasn't electrified Germany in the press over there?
Not exactly. No, there's not a lingering sense of. It's funny, actually. I'm staying in the hotel that we stayed at during the 2008 foreign trip when Obama spoke to 250,000 people here, and let's just say that there's not a similar vibe that Ron DeSantis left behind here. There's more a stench.
Yeah, Ron DeSantis, he could get 25 people at the Brandenburg Gate, not 200,000.
Yeah, exactly.
But Ben, let's start in Sudan because the situation there seems to be getting worse by the day. As we discussed last week, there has been this power struggle between the Sudanese military, led by General Abdel Fattah al-Burhan, and a paramilitary force called the RSF, led by another general known as Hemeti. This has turned into an all-out civil war. Over the past several days, there have been some partial ceasefires that have helped people escape the cities and escape some of the fighting, but have not really been ceasefires. I mean, there's been, literally airstrikes in Khartoum during the ceasefires, so it's still incredibly unsafe. The World Health Organization says that at least 500 civilians have been killed in the fighting. That is almost certainly a drastic undercount. At least 50,000 people have left Sudan since the fighting started, and the UN Assistant High Commissioner for Refugees said they are planning for a scenario where up to 815,000 people flee Sudan into its neighboring countries. So that's just a massive exodus. Millions are still trapped in Khartoum. Reuters reported that some people have even walked 250 miles to South Sudan to escape the fighting. Most others are getting out by taking a very dangerous 500-mile drive to the port of Sudan, where they then can escape via boat if they're lucky. The U.S. has organized at least 3 convoys to help evacuate over 1,000 U.S. citizens from Sudan. The Saudi government is also evacuating a ton of people. I think they've gotten 5,000 people out of many different nationalities. That obviously does nothing for the Sudanese people who are trapped and have nowhere to go. And the New York Times reported that Sudan's healthcare system is on the brink of collapse. The World Food Program said 16% of the food it had stockpiled in the country has been stolen. And that wasn't enough to begin with to feed the population that's already struggling because of a bunch of failed rainy seasons. So, the latest is Hemeti told Western media that, the military is being controlled by Islamist leaders. He says that he and the RSF believe in democracy and civilian control of the government. I think we have a lot of reasons to be skeptical of those sorts of claims from a warlord. But fingers crossed that maybe that will lead him to negotiate and do something decent. The former Sudanese Prime Minister, Abdallah Hamdok, said that he warned that the war could turn out worse than Syria and Libya because this is not a war between an army and a small rebellion. It is almost like 2 armies, was his quote. And he's right? These are 2 incredibly well-armed armies. So before we started recording, Ben, the UN's top envoy in Sudan said the 2 sides have agreed to negotiate finally. Just curious if you're seeing any signs that you're reading in the press or anywhere else that those talks are real this time, have a hope of succeeding, or are these going to be kind of on again, off again ceasefires.
I mean, I think it feels really bad, Tommy. I mean, you summarized it well. I mean, first of all, the only thing that, as you pointed out, the only thing that seems to kind of diminish the fighting for periods of time is like coordinated evacuations of foreigners.
Yeah.
Which on the one end, it's good that, there is a capacity to like, pull a lever and reduce levels of violence and to coordinate with both of these sides to get people out. The bad thing about that, in a way, is there's almost like a feeling that the foreigners are leaving so that the civil war can kind of go on, like they know that they're getting ready for like a really intense and protracted civil war. And so they're kind of allowing for foreigners to get out of the way so that that's not an element that they have to worry about. So that concerns me. The other thing that concerns me is that if you listen to the rhetoric from the two sides, like it's kind of zero sum, right? So Hekmeti, the kind of warlord who, controls upwards of 100,000 people in arms, including like remnants of the Janjaweed militias that carried out the genocide in Darfur. He's talking about, the army being fatally compromised by this Islamist presence. It has echoes, and nothing's like a direct parallel, but it's kind of like has these echoes of Libya.
Yeah.
You have a warlord, Haftar, in Libya, who is also backed by the Emiratis in the same way that they've backed this guy in Sudan, taking on Islamists. And then you have a military that, there's nothing that suggests that the Sudanese military wants to relinquish its control over the state. So it's kind of zero sum for both sides, because if one side concedes to the other, you have to think that's it for them in Sudanese politics. And so it just feels like this is heading in a bad direction. And honestly, like those estimates, usually, they can end up being on the low end, So 800,000 could be like a floor. Now, hopefully that's not the case. Hopefully there's a ceasefire that can hold and lead to a political process. But like right now, I think if we're looking at this candidly, it does not look good.
Yeah, and the suffering is just compounding, because Sudan has been a place that has, I think, taken in a lot of refugees from places like Yemen, and these individuals are now being driven out sort of anywhere they can go. And, a million refugees flowing into any country could be destabilizing, but, flowing into a neighbor like Libya or Chad or South Sudan, countries that have been sort of struggling on their own, in part because of these 5 or 6 failed rainy seasons in the Horn of Africa, like that seems completely unsustainable. It's also interesting that the U.S. went from a little more of a defensive position about like sort of their ability or inability or willingness to help get refugees out to leading all these convoys. I know what Jake Sullivan was saying when he was talking about the U.S. obligation to essentially rescue people from a civil war was that like we can't like send in the military and get them out, but that we would try to help them. But it does seem like they've really sort of turned up the dial on getting folks out in the last week or two.
No, they have. I mean, what's also clear is, I mean, I've heard from a few people that are either in Sudan or have family there, and like everybody wants to leave, right? So this connects to the first question, because, the people who kind of have the best sense of this are the people that are like living in the middle of it. And the people that are living in the middle of this want to get the hell out of Sudan, whether they're American citizens or have U.S., green card status, or whether they're just Sudanese who want to get out. And so I think the U.S. is responding to an enormous demand to get out. And so whatever structure you can put around that, this is not like military style evacuations like in Afghanistan. So the conversation we had last week holds in that the U.S. is not like they're militarily evacuating these people, but they can try to help facilitate evacuation routes, right. Try to help with processing paperwork and vehicles and that kind of thing. And it's pretty clear that like people don't want to stick around. Yeah. And that tells you what the mood must feel like in Khartoum, which is that people are hunkering down for a long conflict. Yeah, absolutely terrifying. Hopefully some of these peace talks work and work quickly. Pod Save the World is brought to you by Brooklinen. Let's hear it for the moms. Woo! Whether they're new mothers, grandmothers, or any honorary mom in your life, we all know they deserve the best all year round. Give them a gift they'll cherish for years to come with Brooklinen's cozy bedding, towels, and other home essentials. Brooklinen makes award-winning bedding that is perfect for every occasion. Whether you're moving to a new house, celebrating your favorite newlyweds, or treating yourself, let Brooklinen sheets be the gift that keeps on giving every day and all night.
Brooklinen is the best sheets according to Wirecutter and Good Housekeeping. So if you don't trust me or their 100,000 five-star customer reviews, you know these experts have done the research. Brooklinen uses only the highest quality materials for all of their products, such as long staple cotton, so everything they create is built to last. They've been making dream spaces a reality for almost a decade, so they're the obvious choice when you're making your house a home. If you're unsure where to start, Brooklinen's bundles will help you save time and money, whether you're outfitting a bedroom, a bathroom, or both. I love my Brooklinen sheets. I love my Brooklinen towels. I love my Brooklinen sweatpants. The last time I looked at the website and tried to buy some, they were out, so I'm going to do that again. I need another pair.
Just popular stuff.
Just popular. So what are you waiting for? Go to brooklinen.com to gift yourself or your loved ones the rest they deserve. First timer, get 15% off your first purchase. And don't forget to sign up for emails to be kept up to date on exclusive offers, new products, and much more. Shop in store or visit Brooklinen for all things comfort. That's BROOKLINEN.com for best-in-class everything for your home. Illuminative has produced a new podcast called American Genocide, which is about how the U.S. government conspired with the Catholic Church to erase Native communities, the crimes committed by Native American boarding schools, and the generational trauma they left behind. This podcast is a gripping true crime story that traces America's attempt to reckon with its past and centers the stories of real Native people and the fallout from the historic abuse of Native children. In the podcast, you'll hear from two Native Americans, one former journalist and one activist, who travel to the Pine Ridge Reservation in South Dakota to chronicle how the dark history of Red Cloud Indian School has caused a rift and intergenerational trauma within the Oglala Lakota tribe. The first two episodes just dropped last week, April 26th, with new episodes launching every Wednesday until May 24th. This limited series will include 6 episodes in total. You guys should check out this podcast because we know Crooked listeners are dedicated to uncovering the truth, to examining untold stories, and uplifting the voices of marginalized peoples. For a listenership who has come to love Crooked's own insightful, principled current affairs programming, American Genocide is a perfect historical true crime companion podcast. Be sure to listen and subscribe to the American Genocide podcast. You can find it on iTunes, Spotify, and other streaming platforms. Find out more on their website at illuminative.org. Pod Save the World is brought to you by Cariuma, the cool, sustainable sneaker company loved by skaters, surfers, and celebs. If you're in search of a good-looking, ultra-comfy, and consciously crafted sneaker to sport this spring season, look no further.
Boy, do we have the product for you.
33,000 five-star reviews. They just cleared a 77,000 person waitlist. These things are exclusive. They're hot. The Akalo is all the rave, and for a reason.
The waitlist is already back at 50,000, I heard.
Waitlists, yeah. They're made with durable, organic cotton canvas. These versatile kicks come in a selection of colors and prints to fit any personality, even a personality as winning as Ashton Kutcher's.
Oh.
From punked to investor.
You know, it was so hard getting him into a pair of Cariumas, but they did it.
And once he did, he realized, I love these things.
He's like, I look great.
I was punking myself, but not wearing these things.
Cariuma's always keeping it fresh with epic collaborations with brands like Deus Ex Machina, Avatar, and Pantone. There's something to love.
Avatar.
Yeah, it came out weird. Avatar. I actually like a giant blue shoe. Be sure to get shoes you'll never get bored of. Now you can welcome the onset of spring, the colors of the season. These are fresh, limited edition colors made in collaboration with Pantone for spring. They just dropped. They got French oak, withered rose, or tapestry blue. I'm guessing.
I like those shoes. What color are those? Withered rose.
Oh, it's a withered rose. Love it's a withered rose guy, as we know.
In my heart.
You are. I could see Favreau with the French oak. I'll rock some tapestry blues.
Nice.
Hit the town. Let's go. Celebrate Earth Month and style the season with EB, one of the lowest carbon footprint sneakers ever made. The only thing lower carbon is barefoot. This feather-light design is made with bamboo, knit for ultimate comfort, and it fits so good, you'll barely know they're there. Made with all vegan and sustainably sourced materials, these sneakers come in a variety of shades, sure to become your new staple shoe of the season. Cariuma ships all their sneakers free and fast in the USA and offers worldwide shipping and 60-day free returns. They deliver right to your front door using single-box recycled packaging. And for a limited time, Pod Save the World listeners can get an exclusive 15% off your pair of Cariuma sneakers. Here's what you do. You go to cariuma.com/world to get 15% off. Again, cariuma.com/world for 15% off only for a limited time. Speaking of peace talks, Ben, so Pope Francis on Sunday said that the Vatican is working on a secret mission to stop the war between Russia and Ukraine. He revealed this to the Vatican press corps on a flight home from this 3-day trip he took to Budapest. where Pope Francis discussed the war with Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orban and a representative of the Russian Orthodox Church in Budapest. Previously, the Vatican has helped facilitate prisoner exchanges between the two sides, so I think there is some sort of, previous work to build on. While in Hungary, Pope Francis gave a speech to a crowd that included Orban, where he called on listeners to welcome migrants. Here's a quote. "How sad and painful it is to see closed doors, the closed doors of our selfishness with regard to others, the closed doors of our individualism amid a society of growing isolation, the closed doors of our indifference towards the underprivileged and those who suffer, the doors we close towards those who are foreign or unlike us, towards migrants or the poor." Pretty direct shot at Viktor Orban's immigration policies. Unfortunately, but I don't know if you saw this, the New York Times was there for the speech. They interviewed a bunch of Hungarians in the audience about the speech and sort of like their reaction to it. And a lot of them didn't really view it as a shot at Orban at all and generally seemed to support Orban's immigration policies and said, well, the fact that the Pope has been here 3 times now suggests that he really likes Orban. So a little dispiriting. But I don't know. What do you make of this high wire diplomacy here by Pope Francis?
The whole thing was really interesting to me, Tommy, because Francis was clearly balancing the fact that he knows that going to Hungary validates Orban in a way. Orban can sit there and there's the image of Francis coming to him. As you pointed out with the people in the audience, the main thing that sticks with most people is just that Francis is there and he's there again. And you have a substantial Catholic population there. And Orban has cast himself as a kind of Christian nationalist, right? So Christianity is pretty central to the way in which Orban has built his political movement there, like a return to traditional Christian values, et cetera, et cetera. Now, clearly Francis thought, I'll balance this out by taking some shots. And he called out nationalism. He called out the immigration policy, like you said. And look, I think that matters to an extent, but Orban also kind of controls the media there, right? So if you're watching television in Hungary, you're probably seeing the video of Francis kind of meeting with Orban and shaking his hand or whatever.
Yeah, that's a good point.
And you're not really you're not hearing the messages that he delivered. The only thing that I can think is that there's a history in Eastern Europe of the Catholic Church playing a kind of subversive role, right? So Pope John Paul, who is Polish, famously, was critical to the anti-communism movement of the 80s. The question is whether Francis's message reaches down through the church locally and reaches people in that way. And so in that way, it's kind of a longer game by Francis. But I think Orban's probably pretty comfortable with the visit for now. It does seem like Francis is getting older, right? He's had some health issues, and it seems like he's really trying to address his legacy and trying to he's speaking more openly and forthrightly about these issues. Because again, he was pretty outspoken in what he said about nationalism and migration. The thing that jumps out, of course, is this kind of reference to peace talks. And I don't know. I mean, as someone who dealt with the Vatican diplomatically, they were the third party in our normalization of relations with Cuba. I have tremendous respect for their capacity to be kind of a neutral party mediator. And over the years, Francis has tried to build up ties to the Russian Orthodox Church, which is very close to Putin. But at the end of the day, Putin controls the Russian Orthodox Church. They've kind of become lackeys of him.
Yeah.
And
their commentary about Ukraine has been pretty bloodthirsty, I think, in the past.
Let's just say not exactly the men of the cloth that you and I would justifying war crimes, right? So I think in the short term or medium term, even the best this could do is kind of, like you said, prisoner exchanges, facilitating kind of humanitarian type agreements between different sides. The notion of the Vatican actually brokering a peace deal seems pretty far fetched to me at this point. But hey, there's no reason not to try.
Yeah, I respect the hell out of Pope Francis for trying. As you said, I think he's 86 years old. He just had some health issues, so it's amazing that he's out there taking these visits. I also saw, Ben, that there was a Russian oil depot in Crimea that went boom. The Ukrainians said that they hit it with a drone, I think, in preparation for this spring counteroffensive that we've all been waiting for a while. It seems like maybe it'll start in May. Maybe it'll be a summer offensive and it'll slip to June. I mean, I think listening to some military experts, it seems like from a Ukrainian perspective, the longer they wait, the more time they have to get stuff American tanks and German tanks into the country. So unfortunately for, these peace talk efforts, it seems like we're about to see the war ramp up, not ramp down.
Yeah, I think there's no way on earth that there's any substantive peace talks before this Ukrainian offensive. I mean, there's just so much has been building to it, so much momentum. And the Ukrainians, first of all, the Ukrainians are currently taking a position that they're not going to negotiate until Russia's completely out of their territory, right, including Crimea. I think at a minimum, there's no way the Ukrainians would want to enter in any negotiation without taking back a pretty good chunk of additional territory that Russia's claimed, right? So particularly like breaking, that land bridge between eastern Ukraine and Crimea, so southern Ukraine around like Mariupol. They're not going to want to sit down and have peace talks having lost territory since the Russian invasion. So everything is kind of waiting for this offensive. I do think you and I were like going back and forth on the Atlantic piece about this, where Jeffrey Goldberg and Applebaum sat with Zelensky and kind of the senior Ukrainian leadership. What was interesting about that is that their rhetoric in that piece was, hey, we're not even going to need to take Crimea. Like there are going to be these kind of, one-off strikes, and we're going to so decisively beat Russia in other places that Crimea will naturally kind of, fall back into our sovereignty. You never know what's disinformation. And I don't mean this in like a negative sense. Like if I was the Ukrainians, I would be telegraphing that the offensive's coming in precisely the place that it's not, which is what they did last time, right? They said they were going to do a major offensive in Kherson, and then they did this lightning offensive in the north around Kharkiv. I only say that to make the point that like, we don't know whether Crimea is in their crosshairs right now or not. And they have every reason, and I support it, to kind of confuse us all about what they're going to do.
That's funny you said that. I've not read that long Atlantic piece yet because it's hefty. But I had the same thought. I had the same thought when I saw them say, "Oh yeah, we struck this oil depot in Crimea as part of our counteroffensive." I was like, "Huh, is this a head fake? Is this a real deal? Is this just hitting supplies?" Like I don't know. We'll all find out very, very soon.
We'll find out when we find out. Exactly.
This show is sponsored by BetterHelp. How do you balance time for yourself in a given week and time for others? I'm going to say like exercise, fully me time.
Yep.
So I do that. Let's be honest, like when you go to work, like you work in a little bit of time for yourself.
Me time.
Even at the office.
That's my scrolling. I think Love is doing it right now.
Scrolling away.
I was actually sending a thank you note.
Oh,
wow. That's some you time too.
To yourself?
Yeah, I did a little pat on the back.
Listen to that gratitude. It's so easy to get caught up in what everyone else needs from you and never take a moment to think about what you need from yourself. But when we spend all of our time giving, it can leave us feeling stretched thin and burned out. Therapy can give you the tools you need to find more balance in your life so you can keep supporting others without leaving yourself behind. If you're thinking of starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online, designed to be convenient, flexible, and suited to your schedule. Just fill out a brief questionnaire and get matched with a licensed therapist, and switch therapists anytime for no additional charge. To hear a special message from Crooked World on the importance of mental health, visit betterhelp.com/crookedworld. That's betterhelp, HELP.com/crookedworld, and get 10% off your first month of therapy when you sign up. Pod Save the World is brought to you by ZipRecruiter. Did you know that there are 20 million college students in the U.S.? And millions of them will be graduating soon. That's a good news for hiring managers, because if you need to hire, it means there will be a lot of fresh talent to choose from for your open roles. But how can you stand out to attract top talent first? The answer is ZipRecruiter. And right now you can try it for free at ziprecruiter.com/pod. ZipRecruiter's technology sends you great candidates for your job, and you can send a personal invite to your top choices so they're more likely to apply. ZipRecruiter also lets candidates know when they are a great match for your job, so it stands out. To help your job post attract the right candidates, ZipRecruiter also offers attention-grabbing labels like remote, training provided, and so much more. Reach the people you want to hire with ZipRecruiter. 4 out of 5 employers who post on ZipRecruiter get a quality candidate within the first day. See for yourself. Go to this exclusive web address to try ZipRecruiter for free. That's ZipRecruiter.com/pod. Again, that's ZipRecruiter.com/pod. ZipRecruiter, the smartest way to hire. Speaking of big events coming up, Ben, the coronation of King Charles III will happen this Saturday, May 6th at Westminster Abbey. That is a spot where coronations have taken place since the year 1066. I mean, it's a long time. So
that's a long time.
I scrolled through about 42 pages of the details that they released, the Archbishop of Canterbury released about the event. It's going to be quite an event for an audience of I think 2,000 people in the room, millions more watching on TV. The last coronation was of Queen Elizabeth II in 1953, so it's been a minute. British citizens have been invited to formally participate in the service by reciting from home, as they watch on television, a new homage of the people, which goes as follows, quote, "I swear that I will pay true allegiance to your majesty and to your heirs and successors according to law, so help me God." So fun, lucky them for getting to say that out loud. For the first time, female bishops and members of other faiths will participate in the service. That's cool. The king and queen will literally travel back to Buckingham Palace from the coronation in a 200-year-old gilded horse-drawn carriage called the Gold State Coach. One challenge for King Charles to be and the future of the monarchy is that polling suggests that most British citizens don't really care about the coronation. YouGov did a poll that found 64% of British adults surveyed had little or no interest in the ceremony. Prince Harry will be attending. Meghan Markle will not. Ben, what's your take on this event? You're a royal correspondent here. How important do you think this is when it comes to maintaining support for the monarchy in the UK? And do you plan on tuning in at 3 a.m. Pacific time when it starts?
So first of all, as part of my royal correspondent duties, on my way out here to Europe, I had a layover in Newark, and I hit the United Club Lounge bar, and they had a coronation special.
Come on.
No, they did. It was called the coronation special, and it was like a Pim's cup, right? If you ever had those.
I love those.
They're pretty delicious, actually. But what's funny is the bartender, somebody asked for a coronation special. And the poor woman who's a bartender, right, who doesn't even really get tips, right, because she's the bartender in the club, is like, "What the hell is that?" She turned to somebody else and "What the hell is coronation? Coronata?" And they're like, "Oh, it's the king, the new king in England." And nobody had any idea. Clearly some mastermind of the United Lounges was we're gonna have a correspondent. Nobody knew what this thing was. Let's just say that that would not have been the case with Charles and Diana's wedding or with Queen Elizabeth's coronation.
Totally.
I just don't think people around the world are waiting with bated breath for the coronation of King Charles.
Especially not in Newark.
Especially not in Newark.
Drink
right?
a fucking
Let's be
beer,
clear.
kid. Get out of my way.
Yeah, they just get a beer. The second thing is there's a cost of living crisis in the UK, right? Inflation is a pain in the ass to people. I don't know that the 200-year-old gilded carriage is the way to connect with the people amidst the cost of living crisis. So
did I mention that it's air conditioned? Because it is.
Well, there you go. They're gonna have to be a little careful here in knowing the royals. They're probably not going to be that careful in the lavish kind of opulence of their subsidized lives is going to be on display. So there are risks here too. They're probably looking at the upside, right? Everybody feels this pride and this connection to history that goes back to 1066, and a lot of Brits will feel that. We saw this when Queen Elizabeth died. There's a weird connection, obviously, to the monarchy that's hard for us to understand as Americans. I have to think some people are going to look at this though and be like, how much does this cost?
Right.
This seems a little extravagant. Now, what's in it for them is you don't get that many moments to try to break through and connect with the public. And so how this goes, how Charles comports himself, how Harry, whether he shows up and talks to his brother, everybody's going to watch all this stuff really closely. Let's just say that if they screw this up, they don't get another shot at it.
Yeah.
So I actually think there's some stakes involved here.
Yeah, not until his funeral. It is. Imagine just being you're Australian and you're one day you wake up and now King Charles is the head of state for Australia. And you're wait, what? How are we still doing this? What's happening?
This guy's the head of state. I mean, I and it's no disrespect to Charles, who's has admirable qualities, but I keep looking at the British pounds I have, Queen Elizabeth all over the money. I'm is Charles going to be on all this money? How are people going to feel about that? How are people in Canada and Australia going to feel about him being the head of state? I mean, I really do. And again, it's not a shot at this guy. I mean, the Queen had some other stuff going for her, above all that she'd kind of been around forever. I do wonder whether more Commonwealth countries are going to go, the way of their own exit, not Brexit, but monarchy exit. I think we might see, the next 5 years or so, some more countries be we might move to not have the monarch of the UK be our
For
head of
sure.
state.
Ben, so speaking of the royal family, I noticed that there was a recent court filing where Prince Harry alleged that Rupert Murdoch's British newspaper group had paid, quote, a huge sum of money to Prince William back in 2020 to settle a cell phone hacking case, presumably of William's phone at some point along the way. Harry's bringing this case against the Sun newspaper and other tabloids for hacking into his voicemail at some point. Listeners might recall that back in the day, the Sun hacked and released voicemail messages between Prince Charles and his then mistress, Camilla Parker Bowles, when they were having an affair. I will spare you the details of some of the most atrocious, awkward, dirty talk you've ever heard, but don't Google
In the history of
it.
humanity.
I mean, rereading it, I was just like, Jesus Christ. I can't, I wrote it out and I deleted it. But it was interesting to read about that case, knowing that he's going to the coronation, and then to read a report in Semaphore that Rupert Murdoch had called Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky earlier this year. Lachlan Murdoch spoke to Zelensky too. There was some speculation about whether they discussed Tucker Carlson's views on the war, if that got him fired. Semaphore said they did not. But anyway, the whole thing was just, it was weird. It was a throwback. What's old is new again. Murdoch's in the news. It's just odd.
First of all, the whole concept that they basically is a business model, like hack into people's voicemails is insane.
Yeah.
Like that's just something like a lot of the ugliness in British media, thanks to Rupert Murdoch, has crossed the pond over here to the U.S. But like that, not that I'm aware of in the hacking voicemails thing, but the Zelensky thing did jump out to me, and it's the kind of thing that drives me fucking crazy about Rupert Murdoch and Lachlan Murdoch as the kind of Kendall Roy CEO bros in charge now, because every now and then you'll see these stories like, oh, Rupert Murdoch didn't like Trump's election denials, and Rupert Murdoch's uncomfortable with the stance that people on Fox are taking on Ukraine. Well, you fucking own Fox News, bro. So if you really wanted to change this, you could do something other than calling Zelensky and telling him you're with him, right? What would be more important to Zelensky and the Ukrainians is to not let a bunch of America first, nativist, xenophobic, isolationist garbage be on your airways all day. And sure, firing Tucker Carlson's a first step, but we all know that's a drop in the bucket of what needs to happen at Fox. So the fact that Murdoch felt compelled enough to join the kind of cavalcade of celebrities and CEOs who go kiss the Zelensky ring tells you that he felt kind of peer pressure in his own circles to do this outreach. But I don't for a minute think that it means that Rupert Murdoch would ever put Ukrainian sovereignty and lives over his bottom line,
Yeah, no, I totally agree with you. It was just a very strange confluence of events. I wonder what more we're going to learn if Prince Harry goes through with this case, because it seems like Harry's in a place where he's not looking for a big settlement. He's looking to punish these papers.
I have to say, if there's something you have to say for Harry, he's just willing to burn it all down, And I do think his rage is well targeted at the uglier aspects of tabloid media.
Yeah, for sure.
If I were advising him, what I'd say too is don't focus, don't attack the entire media. Because sometimes he slips into this everybody who's in the media, everybody who's a journalist, he is in his crosshairs. No, pick the egregious examples of tabloid filth, voicemail hackers, and just go all in against those guys, because he'll get the attention if he does it, and hopefully it can curb the excesses in what is legitimately a gross tabloid culture in the UK.
Disgusting tabloid culture. So Ben, Turkey has a presidential and parliamentary elections coming up on May 14th. President Tayyip Erdogan is hoping for a coronation like his buddy King Charles, but he's facing a tough challenge from this kind of low-key opposition candidate named Kemal Kılıçdaroğlu. Erdogan is facing general political headwinds that are pretty serious. Turkey was hit with this catastrophic earthquake in February. The government response was abysmal. That came on top of runaway inflation that reached as high as 85% in Turkey. Erdogan has been around. He's been president since 2014. He was prime minister from 2003 to 2014. He was the mayor of Istanbul in the late 90s. So he's been the face of Turkish politics for a very long time. he owns these political problems in a big way. And the coalition of opposition parties that oppose him argue that he has harmed Turkey's democracy and the economy by basically being an authoritarian. And they have promised to return Turkey to a parliamentary system and undo this power grab Erdogan executed in 2018 to give himself more control. So, these two candidates are very different. Erdogan, he's been on the scene for decades in power. He's seen as authoritarian. He's pissed off a bunch of other countries in the region by supporting Islamist parties. Kılıçdaroğlu is this former economist, kind of low-key guy with a record as a corruption fighter who's trying to hold together a weird, motley, diverse coalition of these 6 opposition parties. If elected, he's promised only to serve 1 term. So obviously this election is important for Turkey's future. It's important for NATO. It's potentially important for the European Union. On Sunday, Erdogan announced that Turkey's intelligence forces had killed the leader of ISIS in Syria. This was very random and weird. He made this announcement after being off the campaign trail for a few days with some illness he described as stomach flu. But Ben, this opposition coalition reminds me a little bit of the unsuccessful effort to defeat Viktor Orban in Hungary.
Yes.
Okay. How are you feeling about the odds of this Erdogan losing here?
No, that's so interesting you said that, because there are a lot of commonalities, right? So the Hungarian opposition decided to pool all the parties behind one person, and the person they chose was kind of low key, like not a hugely charismatic figure. It was more like, let's return to democracy, let's return to normalcy. Right. And that seemed like an interesting idea, and it totally didn't work, And so here, I guess the bet is like Erdogan's been around for even longer than Viktor Orban, right? So the bet may be that there's just more fatigue with Erdogan. Keep in mind that like the structural challenges to the system that this guy's talking about, like the return to democracy, Erdogan came up as prime minister back when being prime minister used to be the most powerful role in the Turkish government. He then changed the constitution essentially to make the presidency the most powerful office when he became president. And so he's completely rigged this system to suit himself. And he's like caused like there's a little bit more negative impact on ordinary Turks and even Hungarians have experienced, in the sense that like there's just been this insane runaway inflation, largely because of mismanagement. This isn't like the normal European cost of living crisis. This is like Erdogan doing crazy shit with the economy. So I guess the bet is Erdogan is more autocratic. He's been around for longer. People are more tired of him. The economy's really in the shitter. And if we just have this kind of guy that can unite these different factions, present himself as like basically the opposite of Erdogan. He's not a cult of personality. He's like a more reserved personality who will return things to democracy. That might pull things together. And like this, keep in mind, like this is a coalition that's going to include everybody from kind of like the Istanbul cosmopolitan types to like Kurdish voters who are like obviously turned off by Erdogan's approach in those areas. It's worth a shot. I kind of just feel like the Hungary example, which kind of sits in my mind just because we followed that election closely, is like you might want a little more kind of charisma and energy from the opposition, like, a little more vision articulated for the future. But it's going to be a real choice for Turks. I mean, they can see where Erdogan's leading them. It's not great. There's this person basically pledging to like unite the rest of the country who are not Erdogan dead enders in a return to democracy. And, it'll be a real test. I mean, the test one is, does Erdogan allow for a free election, or do we see kind of incidents of fraud or intimidation or efforts to control the outcome? Then the second thing is just like whether this kind of message can work, because it didn't work in Hungary, but obviously Turkey's quite a different country than Hungary. Yeah,
fingers crossed, and we'll be watching this one over the next couple of weeks. A few more updates, Ben, on the hundreds of documents leaked onto the social media site Discord by an Air National Guardsman named Jack Teixeira. So we now have learned that Teixeira's job, and that the job of about 1,200 people on his base in Massachusetts, was to support the Pentagon's drone programs around the world. A bunch of outlets did deep dives into Teixeira's job and how the military drone program has expanded since 9/11, where there were about, I think, 200 drones in service in 2001 to 11,000 in the U.S. military in 2019 when Teixeira joined. and how the Air National Guard units, like the 102nd Fighter Wing in Massachusetts, now are like more actively in support of that drone program. So in short, 9/11 and the global war on terror is why Teixeira had access to the materials that he leaked. We know that for sure. In terms of the reporting on the leaked documents themselves, the Washington Post ran a piece about how the U.S. found evidence that the Chinese government is continuing construction on a military facility in the United Arab Emirates, despite the UAE claiming to have halted it because of U.S. concerns. This information was part of this, like, I think, a broader intel report on China's efforts to build military bases overseas. The concern is that, China could use these installations to monitor or interfere with U.S. naval movements or whatever. I think the Chinese respond like, hey, you guys have hundreds of bases abroad. We're trying to have like 5. Can everyone chill out, please? But anyway, no surprise there. But Ben, stepping back, like, it is fascinating to me how often the UAE is popping up in these leaks so far. Yeah. The reputation that the UAE has bought in Washington with investments, by buying lots of arms, by having kind of a glitzy ambassador who knows everyone at Morning Joe and throws parties. It's very different than the reality that's being laid out in these documents. It's notable.
I'd say so. I mean, first of all, the drone thing is interesting because to me, like, it explains a lot. And you're right, like, there's a war on terror origin story here. And just to be clear, like, not all these drones are like the drones that people have in their minds that take out terrorists. I mean, we do a ton of, surveillance, reconnaissance in the air with drones.
Yeah, most are unarmed.
But I still don't understand why that would require this guy to be reading essentially General Milley's briefing book. So it's still feels like an unanswered question to me. There's just got to be a way to compartmentalize these systems. But the UA thing is super noteworthy to me because part of what, again, we are learning from these leaked documents is what are the priorities of the U.S. intelligence community? And those priorities reflect things that they're seeing that worry them. So back when I was an intelligence consumer, you were an intelligence consumer, if something, you could kind of tell something was wrong somewhere if you started to get a lot of intelligence reports about it. It's this is their way of warning you, hey, this is not going in the right direction. And everything we're seeing from this UAE stuff is suggesting that they're just not on the level, that because it's the Chinese building a military installation. It's the Russians thinking they can literally enlist the Emiratis to their side in spying on the United States. These are not small deviations from Washington foreign policy. And we pointed this out before, but the point is there's a massive influence operation from the Emiratis on the American establishment and the American elite. And it's every faction of that elite, right? So it's American businesses that like investments from the Emirati Sovereign Wealth Fund and the fact that the Emiratis are liquid, they can put a lot of money in all kinds of things. It's the American national security establishment that, when people are out of government, they do lucrative consulting gigs for the Emiratis or they do lucrative speaking gigs in the Emirates. And it's, as you point out, go look at the history of, who is spotted in Politico playbook. You will find the Emirati ambassador in Washington frequently in, Cafe Milano, the kind of gross Georgetown hangout of the Washington elite, or throwing birthday parties for American media personalities, or I'm sure he was all over the Washington Correspondents' Dinner, and there's just such a coziness and chumminess between the American establishment and the Emiratis. And meanwhile, underneath the hood, while that's happening, the Chinese are building military bases, or at least what could become military bases, and the Russians feel like they have a potential partner in the Emiratis. Something is happening here. The intelligence community seem to be trying to warn policymakers of this, and it will be interesting to see what becomes of this information being public, or whether it just kind of conveniently gets kind of cast aside by people in Washington who don't want to believe that the Emiratis are anything other than the people that throw nice parties and say the right things, and we build up into these close partners and allies.
This reminded me of a funny story. I was so bad at interacting with that kind of cool, more adult class of people that I actually got seated. One of the years I went to the White House Correspondents' Dinner was 2010. I think me and Favreau went with Politico. We happened to be at the same table. And I think we were supposed to be seated around Yusuf Al Taiba, the ambassador of the UAE, and we switched the place cards so that we could like sit on our own in the corner and just like slam drinks instead of talking to this guy, which is a very childish thing to do, but I don't regret it at all.
Especially because he was hugely like. I mean, I said to Yusuf Al
like
Taiba,
Obama.
who I got to know, did not like Obama, but I remember saying to him like one point because I think this is an important point. Like, I kind of don't blame him, right? Like that's his job. Right?
He's very good at his job.
Yeah, I said to him once, because I used to get in these arguments with him, but I'm like, you're doing your job and you're doing it really well. Like it's on us, it's on Americans. Right. Like, of course, foreign ambassadors want to come here and like build influence, right? So this is like ultimately this comes back to whether like people in Washington care more about like preserving a certain social scene than they care about national interests.
And
let's
also,
go, people.
The press corps obviously kind of takes the bait on blaming the U.S. for like other countries' foreign policy decisions. So like this Washington Post story included this graph. An Emirati political analyst said the UAE began exploring other security partners after what the nation saw as America's slow response to missile attacks against Abu Dhabi by Iranian-backed Houthi rebels in Yemen. And it's like, guys, you, by all means, hedge your bets. Like you're going with the Chinese, going with the Russians if you want, UAE. But China's not going to fight your fucking war in Yemen for you. So I don't know what you think this quote does to advance the story.
Well, and before that, it was the Iran deal. And before that, it was like Mubarak and Egypt. Like there's always something that it's the U.S.'s fault that like we're forcing the royal family of the Emirates to become autocratic.
Exactly.
That's like they always have been. Like they just... I like the blame America for what other countries choose to do thing, always grates, and even more so in this case.
It's a little much. Let's just allow every country some agency. One alliance that seems pretty solid at the moment, Ben, is the U.S. and South Korea. So President Biden welcomed President Yoon of South Korea to the White House last week for a state visit. The key deliverable from their meeting was basically to reaffirm the U.S. security guarantee for South Korea in the face of continued North Korean aggression on their nuclear program and their missile program, et cetera. And there was a specific promise for more consultation with South Korea about strategy on nuclear weapons use, which was billed as this big deliverable. And I'm like, I guess, but like I would hope we wouldn't nuke the shared peninsula they live on without talking to the rocks first. But anyway, it's a hell of a lot better than them developing nukes on their own, I guess. But
yes.
So this seemed like a bit of a repackaging of current policy. But what stole the show in Washington was when President Yoon took the mic at the state dinner and decided to sing. Here's a clip.
February made me shiver with the paper I deliver. Bad news on the doorstep. I couldn't take one more step. I can't remember if I tried when I read about his widow bride. Something touched me deep inside the day the music died.
I can't imagine having the guts to grab the mic in front of the President of the United States, a bunch of fucking fancy people at a state dinner, essentially go a cappella until the Marine band kind of comes in with a little bit of keys to help him out, singing American Pie there. But apparently it's his favorite song. Biden gave him a signed guitar. I don't know, gutsy move.
I mean, there's a great karaoke culture in South Korea. Let's be clear.
Oh yeah, you and I have participated in it.
Yeah. Like a certain night in Yokohama comes to mind, and where was it, 2010? I just want to say though that like, look, I like American Pie as much as the next guy. I'm not sure that's not my karaoke go-to.
It's a little too slow.
It's not like energy there. Like it's not like it's not energy, and there's not like irony, right? Because when I go slow karaoke, I go like "Greatest Love of All" by Whitney Houston, or like "Patience" by Guns N' Roses.
Okay, yeah.
I mean, the guy has some game. I mean,
he's got pipes.
What do you think?
Hey, listen, look, Don McLean is singular person in terms of songwriting, but that was a pretty good rendition, I thought. For Head of State?
He hung in there for Head of State. I certainly never saw anything quite like that. The only time I saw something kind of that crazy was at the ASEAN dinner in Indonesia in 2011 when Quincy Jones got up and sang "We Are the World" and invited Obama and the Chinese premier to join him on stage and singing that.
I remember that.
And let's just say they didn't get on stage, but look, I mean, to be serious for a moment, like this stuff matters, the symbolism of 70 years of the South Korean alliance. there's always political division in South Korea about the alliance. There are people there that kind of don't like the heavy, the heavy footprint of the U.S. military. People there that obviously feel like China is right next door, and maybe we should be drawing closer to them. And so you constantly have to tend to this alliance, and it was important to have that kind of state visit. I do agree with you. Like the nuclear thing felt kind of like, we named, we kind of put a label on something that we already do, right? Which is consult with them about nuclear use on the Korean Peninsula. What I take away from that is two things. One, as you referenced, like a slight concern that if the South Koreans feel like they can't really count on us and they don't know where this is going, and people like Trump are crazy, and that maybe they could get their own nuclear weapons, which technologically they could probably figure out how to do pretty fast. And so I think this was an effort to try to mitigate those impulses in South Korea. And also just a sense that there's an understanding that in South Korea, people are looking at this and thinking, is this the best long-term bet for us, or should we make our own kind of deals with China? And right now you have a conservative president in South Korea, although an unpopular one. But I think it's smart to try to hug them as tight as we can. And I think we should substantively consult more with them on all this stuff. So there's a feeling of equal partnership in the relationship.
Yeah. I mean, look, it's a pretty good little life hack there from President Yoon. If you're going to Washington and your deliverable is some scary nuke thing, and all the questions coming in are about why the Americans spied on you so much, you just start singing, and that's all that anyone's going to focus on.
That'll be the story.
That's how your story.
That's exactly right.
The person who could have taken this advice, Ben, is Ron DeSantis, who has been traveling abroad. It has not gone great. So Politico interviewed some business leaders who went to a dinner he attended with him in London. Here are some of the quotes. He definitely looked spent, but his message wasn't presidential. He was horrendous. One said it was low wattage, and that nobody in the room was left thinking this man is going places. It felt a bit like we were watching a state-level politician. I wouldn't be surprised if people came out thinking, that's not the guy. There wasn't any stardust. It felt like the end of an overseas trip, which it was. So you and I talked last week about Ron's specific itinerary, like why do you go to Japan, South Korea, the UK, and Israel? Technically, it was called a trade mission, but everyone knows he was campaigning. My question today is, after watching this thing, is the juice worth the squeeze on these trips? I mean, to the extent anyone is talking about this trip, it was the weird reaction he had in Japan. It was how bad this meeting was in the UK. It was how pissy he seemed at the press conference in Israel. There's now a big controversy in Florida about who the hell paid for his flights, because he won't release the donors who paid for this private charter flight he took, which must have cost $500,000 to $1 million. So I obviously care a lot about foreign policy. I think when you're running for president, it's actually unquestionably the place where you have the most freedom to act. So we should really vet these things. But if I was advising a candidate, I don't think I would advise them to go overseas. I'm just not sure it's worth it. Where do you land?
Definitely not. I mean, first of all, for him to whiff in the UK like that, I mean, he was meeting with business leaders. These people want Ron DeSantis to be good, right?
Right.
The reason those quotes matter is these people are basically Republicans.
It's your
they're
base,
Tories,
yeah.
Yeah, they're base. They're rich British banker type guys, right? They don't like Trump. They think Trump is weird and a little crazy and what they feel uncomfortable about America about. But Ron DeSantis, these guys desperately wanted him to be good. They want a more country club kind of Republican that they recognize, show up and tell them it's all going to be okay and we'll just cut taxes and regulations like we used to. And the fact that he fucking whiffed this hard with what should be his base, in the entire world, Ron DeSantis' base should be a bunch of Eton educated, Oxbridge educated, rich white guys in London, And the fact that these guys are just throwing haymakers at him after he was there, he must have just totally fucked it up. And you're right about these trips. I mean, again, this is a bit of an Obama derangement syndrome, because there wasn't really a tradition of candidates going on foreign trips this high profile. And then Obama kind of crushed it in 2008. I mean, I'm here, Tommy, like I said, I can throw a rock and hit the place where 250,000 Germans were in the streets, and he was meeting with foreign leaders, and that was undeniably a boost to him. And you've seen these Republicans try to replicate this. Mitt Romney disastrously like flubbing his way through the UK and Israel and Poland, like up to DeSantis. Like I don't get what these people think they're achieving. They're like playing at being president. They're like, maybe they want to go see Bibi in Israel, but you could just meet Bibi when he comes to the US. Like I have no idea what the hell Ron DeSantis is thinking. Like, other than the fact that Ron DeSantis seems to look in the mirror and see President DeSantis, and apparently nobody else really does.
And like DeSantis, even in Israel, kind of rolled into a giant constitutional crisis. I think Kevin McCarthy is there now, undercutting Joe Biden, saying it's disgusting that he hasn't invited Bibi Netanyahu to Washington yet, and which is absurd given what they're going through. And even that Obama trip, which I think unquestionably went well. The minute we got back, the McCain campaign greeted us with this big ad campaign comparing Barack Obama to Paris Hilton and just calling him a celebrity who needs big crowds. And I don't think it was a good attack, but it reframed the debate. It got in our heads, you know?
No, that's right. It kind of worked for them. It kind of blunted the momentum. But just even that goes to show you, Obama executed that trip, and I wouldn't say this about everything we did, but he didn't make any mistakes, and he basically got endorsed by multiple world leaders, and he gave a speech to 250,000 people. And even that, the McCain campaign, you're right. He's the world's biggest celebrity, but is he ready to lead? I remember that was the ad. And it kind of the press was ready for that narrative. They're like, oh yeah, why was he out of the country? I don't get these trips. I other than placating the size of these guys' egos, I don't really know what they're accomplishing.
I don't either. Yeah, you're right though. I do think it sort of boils down to looking in the mirror and seeing a president and deciding that the way to do that is to be on the world stage on a Florida trade mission. What are you doing? Well,
did you notice Trump years, the Trump family seemed to kind of their favorite part of being president was just knowing these world leaders. You know, Jared and Ivanka would show up at all these summits.
For sure.
And Trump loves, to this day, Trump is still talking about how top of the line all these autocratic buddies of his were. There's something for all the Republican xenophobia, there's some weird complex about foreign leaders and stuff that get more than Democrats. They get a little too excited about this stuff.
Yeah, little too excited. Ben, thanks again. What time is it in Germany right now? 10:30 p.m.
It's 10:30, and I try to bring my highest energy, but it's 10:30, and I don't even know what time I technically woke up this morning, but it's nice here.
You seem shockingly awake to me, if we're being honest. And if I were you, I would go get another pint.
I'm gonna get a pint, and I'm riding the high of seeing young. I mean, I like to be serious for a moment. It's pretty cool to meet activists and people running for office and people fighting the same shit we're fighting, right? Disinformation and far right nationalism here in Europe. But the challenges are also remarkably similar. That's the depressing element. It's hearing how common all the crap is, conspiracy theory. Some guy was telling me tonight. Did you hear this? There was a big conspiracy theory getting traction on the far right here about how the EU was gonna make people eat crickets instead of meat. Did you hear this?
I've gotten flavors of this. There's it's sort of the AOC Green New Deal cow farts banning meat, a collection of nonsense about climate change, right?
It's the globalization of stupid, so that's the depressing part, but it's good to see these people. But yeah, no, I am looking forward to another pint and see if I can make it through the night.
Yeah, a couple hours of sleep. All right, man. Well, safe travels and talk to you guys next week.